Is this good? Perfect. Okay. Good morning, Brooks. The morning after the Super Bowl. Go Eagles. I guess I wasn't really thinking ahead when I chose this date as my speech, but hopefully you bear with me, okay? The first time I went to Washington, D.C. was in July of 2015. I was a junior in high school, touring some of the amazing colleges that D.C. has to offer. Some of you were around for my chapel speech 2 years ago, in which I told you about my initial ambitions of becoming some sort of lawyer or politician. So this was my peak era of thinking that I wanted to be in DC. Crazy how that ended up translating to me at a small school in Maine, but there's that. Something about DC just clicked for me. I loved the bustle of the city, the marble of the statues, and the overall feeling of civic engagement around me. This is where politicians got to work, negotiated, and made change. This was home to some of the most historic and heroic moments in American history. I remember walking over to the National Mall for the first time and picturing 250,000 people there in 1963 listening to Dr. King and protesting for jobs and freedom. I remember seeing the White House and thinking that there's a man who looks like part of my family in that building. As I saw the Supreme Court, I was reminded how many of my rights had been solidified at that exact building. As I went to museum after museum, I was incredibly amazed at learning about what our country had been through historically and how we had gotten to that particular moment. A couple years later, in 2017, I returned to DC on a school trip. The African American History Museum had just opened a couple months prior, and I was eager to visit. This time, I felt even more invigorated in DC, following the Women's March that took place in January that gathered 1.3 million marchers across the US, and 500,000 alone in DC. It was safe to say that DC always felt like a place of importance to me. In this 68 square mile area, landmark decisions, laws, and orders that have changed the course of history had taken place. It was a place of hope, dissent, and most importantly, democracy. Since then, I've been to DC several times, but I want to focus on my most recent trip. Last week, on February 4th, I touched down in DC again to attend a conference about civic engagement. I was nervous. Following the news of the DCA plane crash on January 29th, my anxiety about flying had been at an all-time high. Entering DC right now, also with the uncertainty of what the plethora of executive orders meant for our country going forward, also left me feeling deeply unsettled. As I mentioned, the purpose of this conference was to discuss civic engagement. For those of you who don't know, I teach AP Government, and I think I've proven to you all over the last 2 years how passionate I am about the government. For the purpose of this talk, I'm defining civic engagement as the individual and collective actions designed to address issues of public concern. I'll read it again. The individual and collective actions designed to address issues of public concern. When I think about civic engagement, I think a lot about integrity, one of our school pillars that we've focused on this year. I think about doing the right thing when nobody's watching. I think of taking small steps to make the community better. I think of standing up for what is right and not allowing others to hurt. Civic engagement can look very different. Community service, volunteering, attending a local public meeting, philanthropy, activism, voting, social entrepreneurship, and many more examples. Civic learning is an essential 21st century skill, and I'm here today to tell you why I think Brooks can do better on delivering on mission and carrying out our values pertaining to civic engagement. How many of you are on TikTok? All right, yep. Instagram? Cool. Any form of social media that delivers you a lot of news right now? Yeah, okay, it's a lot of you. How many of you have been feeling inundated, confused, excited, or angry by the news right now? Okay. Me too. In fact, my screen time has improved so much in the last few months because I just can't handle taking in more news at times. And while there are times it's important to take breaks and practice self-care, it is also crucial to remain informed and engaged in what's going on outside of our Brooks bubble. Since my time at Brooks, we've always taken the path of neutrality. But as an independent school, there is less of an obligation to remain neutral. We say we have these values: empathy, engagement, integrity, passion, confidence, and creativity. But why have we chosen not to embody them over the last few months? In fact, we call empathy and engagement our preeminent, meaning our distinguished or highly prioritized values. We model and hold ourselves accountable to these values in ways that prepare our students to be exemplary citizens and strong leaders of communities throughout their lives. How are we embodying these values if we haven't even held space or modeled the ability to discuss what's going on in the world around us? If we haven't even named some of the hurt and threat people are feeling at this moment? Who can really afford to be neutral right now when humanity and identity are under attack? Neutrality and silence is a statement in itself. James Baldwin once said, "We can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and the denial of my humanity and right to exist." In Brooks's own words, the school emphasizes a moral awareness and strives to provide daily lessons in tolerance, integrity, and social responsibility. Civility and decency are as important now as ever before. If you remember the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, I was just discussing a little bit before, this led to the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 by President Lyndon B. Johnson. This was landmark legislation after years of fighting and protesting that led to outlawing discrimination in public places in the U.S. This formally integrated schools, public facilities, and ended workplace discrimination. This was reinforced when LBJ then signed Executive Order 11246, which prohibited employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, and advanced equity by putting forward affirmative action policies for federal agencies. On January 20th, 2025, President Trump signed Executive Order 14151, the Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. On January 21st, 2025, President Trump also signed Executive Order 14173, Ending Illegal Discrimination and Restoring Merit-Based Opportunity. You can see some of the specifics up there that this executive order overturned, but overall, this act ended DEI policies federally and pushed for the same in the private sector, which is why you're seeing big names like Target, Walmart, McDonald's, and many more ridding of their DEI and anti-racist policies that were primarily put in place after the George Floyd murder in 2020. This ultimately proves that these companies were only doing this to be performative and because it was an important economic decision to make at the time so that their businesses didn't suffer. You may think a return to meritocracy is the right direction for America. However, did you know that everyone in this room actually benefits from DEI policies? If you have a learning profile and learning accommodations, if you want to be a parent in the future who takes paid leave to spend time with your newborn baby, if anyone in your family was a veteran, if you have your right to equal pay, flexible work, and access to mental health support in the workplace. If you still don't believe me, DEI is actually more profitable. McKinsey, a top global management consulting firm's 2020 report on how inclusion matters, found that companies with diverse leadership teams were 36% more profitable than their less diverse counterparts. So if you're against DEI policies, tell me what part you disagree with. Is it diversity, the representation of people from all races, genders, sexual orientations, disabilities, religions, countries, class status, and many more? Is it equity, fairness and impartiality, and whether or not all people are receiving the same fair treatment? Or is it inclusion, whether people feel like they belong and are valued or not? This is not partisan. This is about humanity. How many of you have read the student handbook? Like actually, like for real, like deep in all 100 pages? Yeah. So on page 8 and 9 of the student handbook lives the Brooks School Anti-Racist Statement, which was written in the summer of 2020. I'll read it to you. Brooks School strives to be an anti-racist school, understanding that this work is continuous and is central to our role as an educational institution. Racism and other forms of systemic oppression are deeply rooted in all institutional and societal structures. We condemn institutional racism and white supremacy in all forms, including those that may exist at Brooks. As a community that values each member's sense of belonging, our goal is to foster an inclusive environment in which everyone can live, work, and learn free from prejudice, discrimination, and marginalization. While we recognize that racism occurs both intentionally and unintentionally, and is often a result of unconscious bias, we also know that its presence hinders our ability to provide the most meaningful educational experience our students will have in their lives. Therefore, at Brooks School, we are united in the fight to identify, acknowledge, and dismantle systems of oppression and inequality. In order to do this work effectively, we will draw on our foundation, strong community, core values, and commitment to the care, support, and growth of every member of the community. Brooks, we have said who we are and what we strive to be, but where is the action surrounding belonging, diversity, equity, and inclusion now that it's under attack? Where is the basic acknowledgement to name that it even is under attack? Where is the solidarity with students who are fearful, traumatized, and whose existence and humanity is being called into question and invalidated by federal orders? Have we forgotten our values, that empathy and engagement are preeminent? Was all of this performative, or are we going to actively choose to be on the right side of history? We've stated that we know that the presence of racism and bias hinders our ability to deliver on mission. So what are we going to do about it when we're faced with it head on? We say that we are united in the fight to identify, acknowledge, and dismantle these systemic injustices happening every day. So what's our plan? Civic engagement is always going to be important. We should be having conversations at school about the world around us in order to prepare you to be citizens of the world. It doesn't matter who's president, the need for conversation and space is always going to be there. At this time, the reassurance that every single person in this community matters and belongs is absolutely principal. The time to lean into our values the most is here. Open dialogue and support systems are crucial. Listening to your peers, your teachers, remaining informed about the present, educating yourself on history, asking questions, empathizing, and committing yourself to doing better is part of the work. A step in the right direction actually took place in your emails this morning. I would push you all to attend courageous conversations. I also would welcome all of you to come talk with me anytime. Faculty, we also have a lot of work to do together to think about how we can best support our students and make them feel safe, valued, and like they belong. I hope you'll join me in pushing us to do just that with intentionality. One of the things that I love about being American is that I live in a society that has granted me the privilege to give the speech that I just did. Returning to DC last week and attending the conference gave me the exact invigoration I needed to keep on keeping on. Walking around DC gave me a sense of hope and empowerment. It reminded me of my ancestors who stood there fighting for some of the same things that we must fight for right now. One of the most patriotic things that you can do is critique your country to make it better. And I believe the same goes for Brooks. I love this community so much, and I want us to do better together. I hope that by reminding us of who we are today, we're able to work together, united by our values and guided by our mission to make positive change within our community. Thank you.